Welcome to the Freedom Fridays podcast. With me, your host, Pete Clark, the Whispers guy. Work seems to expand to the time that we give it. And I've been investing my time, occasionally on a Friday, to explore how we use our time, our energy, our attention, and the impact it has on our identity. I've been exploring over season 1 some of the mindset shifts in the handcuffs of I have to the freedom of I choose to. And I've shared some conversations, some tips, some tools about how you might want to invest your own time, your own energy, your own attention. How you might want to, if you choose to, make some changes to your identity. How you might have freedom from I have to and design a life around I choose to. If that's of interest to you, then this is the podcast for you. In season 2, I'm going to be exploring some experts and asking them what freedom means for them, and trying to help people work to live and not live to work. Trying to help people add life to their years and not just years to their life. So let's dive on in, and here's season 2. Welcome to this newest episode of Freedom Fridays. I'm excited because I'm welcoming another guest that I haven't met. We've only just connected offline prior to this. And I'm going to welcome onto the program today a lady who's calling in from the west coast of the US. She has a master's degree in counseling and is an author and is very much immersed in the field that I'm involved in. So please welcome Kristin Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Pete. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And so Kristin, to kick us off, I start with the same question. The podcast's called Freedom Fridays, and often both you and I work with people that are seeking freedom of some sort from some things to another. So I'm interested in the line of work that you do with your clients. What are they seeking freedom from?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of ways I could answer that. But at its most fundamental, I believe, whether they're aware of it or not, people are seeking freedom from nervous system dysregulation. So I think of the nervous system as the operating system of our body. And we're often not conscious of how to be in relationship to it and how to regulate it, but it is at the foreground of how we think, what we feel, how we move, how we breathe or don't breathe well. And it can become the predominant element of our sense of who we are. If it is dysregulated, and I know that a lot of people walk around very dysregulated, and perhaps it started in childhood. But it's a chronic state of dysregulation that leads to so much stress. And if I only had enough money, then I would feel free. If I only had enough time, I would feel free. But the work that I do is helping them to find, if it's even moments of freedom, but it starts in the body, grounding in the body, regulating the nervous system.
That's interesting on many levels, Kristin. I might just start with, I've never heard anyone describe freedom from nervous system dysregulation. And as you spoke, I got a sense of, how that might show up in someone. Can you maybe just give us a couple of examples? How does nervous system dysregulation show up in someone? For perhaps our listeners who aren't immersed in this field, how might it show up?
Yeah. The best way, I think, for me to describe this, it's not going to answer that question directly, but I will get there. So know that I've heard this. I encourage people to imagine a traffic light. And if they're just trying to, because what we're really talking about when I work with clients, what I'm really doing is helping to elevate their own awareness of who they are, what state they're in. And so using the traffic light, I can say, okay, and I did not make this up, by the way, so I completely stole this, and I can't remember the name of the woman I stole it from, but I'm not the only one who's using this. If each color were a state of nervous system activation and each color had accompanying words to it, green would be when you are relaxed. You are present, you are connected to joy, you are connected to yourself. It's called, in polyvagal theory land, it's called ventral vagal. It's nice. And if it had words, it would say, I am. Then I think about our lives and our worlds and all the things that we have to do. And I work with executives. And so they have a lot of responsibility and a lot of stress, but whether you're an executive or you're a stay-at-home parent or whatever you find yourself doing, there is a lot of pressure. And then you get into what is called sympathetic activation. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. In that state, if it had words, it would say, I have to. I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this. So I think people can relate to that feeling of getting out of bed and going, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. It's not that I get to, it's I have to. Green is I get to. Yellow is sympathetic activation, I have to. Then often when I'm working with people, they get to the place of they're bordering on burnout. They're not sleeping well. They're just continually stressed out, tons of anxiety, overthinking. They're in what David Goleman calls an amygdala hijack. They're in the most primitive part of their brain, that is the emotion center, it's the fear center, and they're living there. A lot of cortisol, a lot of adrenaline. I've certainly lived there far longer than I wish that I had. And that is red. And if it had words, it would say, I can't. And in polyvagal land, it's called dorsal shutdown. It's when you get shut down. So often people look like they're checked out. And they look like maybe they seem fine on the surface, but they're bordering into depression and illness. And so many of the people that I work with are saying things to me like, I don't know if this is the life I want to live. Maybe I'm wasting my life. I'm not experiencing joy. Like I felt like this was something I have to do, but I'm losing myself. And so to be able to even have a simple tool like that, to start to register, like there are words for this, you are not alone, to recognize what it feels like in your body, the accompanying emotions, to have language helps the beginning of the journey to start to get back to the green I am and to feel regulated, to smile, to laugh, to connect.
As we chatted before, Kristin, this might take longer than a normal podcast. There's so many things, so many ways I could take this. I'm just going to go with the first thought I had. I'm fascinated by your experience around this starts in our body. And the distinction I'm making is for your average Joe or Jess on the street, when they have issues, whatever they are, I think most of them would think it's in their head.
That's right.
Sitting between their ears. So they go to a therapist, a doctor, a psych, or, they'd be addicted to something. So they might go, I need to get help. I need to get help with what's going on in my head. The irony being, of course, your head is part of your body. Of course, like obviously, but we somehow make this distinction that it's not, I think. And so I'm fascinated in your experience of, everyone would accept, at least intellectually, mind and body, body and mind, same thing. But when we come to seek help, if we've got that awareness, my experience of me and some things I've down the road in earlier on, and some clients and colleagues and family members, is we got to get help about what's going on in our head. And we've inadvertently made this distinction already that that's not my body, which just does not make sense when you lay it out in that sense. So I'm fascinated if you could touch a little bit on that, the aspect to which it sits in our body, and yet we seek help from our head.
Yeah. You just pointed to the crux of where I show up. We can't outthink stress. And it is a big misconception if we think we can. There's so much around positive attitude, positive mindset, reframing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and they have their place and their importance. So I'm not denigrating them.
Yep.
We are the entirety, I would say, mind, body, and spirit, but we have sort of artificially separated them to our detriment.
Yeah.
And so when they look at the communication channels, I say they meaning the neuroscientists, the communication channel between mind and body, brain and body of the spinal cord, nervous system, 80% goes from the body to the brain, 20% goes from the brain to the body. And yet we're up here saying, let me try to outthink this moment.
Yeah.
If I'm nervous, I'm going to remind myself I can do hard things. I'm going to remind myself that I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, all the affirmations. But if the body is saying there's a 5-alarm fire and you are not safe, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then people then think there's something wrong with me. I can't, why I must be disordered.
Yeah, I can't fix myself.
I've got to fix myself. I'm not strong enough.
Yeah.
Rather than understanding that is your nervous system. And there are tools to begin to soothe it. One of the most obvious ones being just breath work, right? Understanding the two branches of the nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and using the breath to engage parasympathetic to down regulate so that we can get out of our amygdala, our lizard brain of like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die.
Yep.
And feel safe and calm so that the parts of our brains that are most evolved can get online. But I'm so grateful that you recognize that and are saying that.
I think it's a real challenge for people because, you know, and I read something recently which some of this, what appears like a really small distinction for me, because I'm immersed in this, and this is partly what I love, it's like such a huge distinction. So even just, for example, you saying, you know, green is I get to, whereas orange is I have to. For me, that is a massive distinction that's so simple yet profound. I read something recently that we're seeking peace of mind when we should be seeking peace from mind, which is such a simple but massive distinction.
Yes.
That's
so beautiful.
Down.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. That is so
okay.
like peace from mind. I mean, unpack that. And there's so much there.
So much there. And yet, and again, I think often people would take it literally and go, yeah, but I've got to think. And I've got a brain for a reason, you know, blah, 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 blah. And post-rationalize maybe the lack of awareness that might be sitting there because it's all in my head.
Yes.
And I just want peace from that. And you know, you're making this beautiful distinction, which do you think, I'm interested in your view, do you think people get it as in they understand the brain, body, spirit connection spiritually? Do they get it intuitively, but they might ignore it cognitively?
Great question. I think it depends. So it depends like on who I'm working with. So I'll just think about the people and you know, much like we were talking about before you started recording, knowing your audience, like who do you share what with, when, and why? That really connects to why they hired you, what they want to accomplish, who they are. Some people I work with, it's an intuitive knowing. And I would say that intuitive, depending on who they are, but my belief, if it were separate from them, when they speak to intuition, to me, that's like a spiritual connection. And there is wisdom in the body. If you were like thinking about the chakras or energy work, like there's a lot there that I know this much about when there's this much to know. I worry when people, I don't worry. I note when people are locked in their head and they want
Yeah.
to just continually try to understand it just cognitively. The work that I do around mindfulness and around nervous system regulation is I hope to support people to be embodied. And whether that's grounding exercises, I help with being in the moment, which is like everyone says, be in the moment, but this sustained moment by moment attention. Start with just feel your hand, close your eyes, and what does it feel like on the inside of your hand? Really training the brain to connect with being in the body. And like when an emotion comes up, so green is I am, yellow is I have to. So let's say they're in I am. When you feel I am, what does your heart feel like? What does your breath feel like? If you feel sympathetic activation, I have to, or you feel any number of emotions, sadness, nervousness, agitation, resentment, what have you, when it's with you, when it is present, where do you feel it in your body? And so what I'm trying to do is, number one, take out judgment. There's no right or wrong, right? It's just an experience. Give it a name. Feel it. What is the sensation? Is it pulsating? Is it dry? Is it hot? Is it, crumbly, like prickly? So it takes away judgment, helps with neutrality, helps with curiosity, and it opens up fields of data. Right? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I want them to start to recognize that this mind, body, spirit, it is just basically this perceptual field that we live in. Open up and pay attention because it's communicating to you.
Does
that make sense to you?
Yes. I'd forgotten the question as well, Kristin, but I'm loving the conversation because it reminds me. So I'll pick up on the last part, and I've got a couple of questions. It's one of the reasons I called my business 21 Whispers, because I believe that life whispers to us, but we only tend to do something when it shouts. Now, the shout might be the 21's an arbitrary number. It could be 6 or 472. It doesn't really matter. The 21st whisper could be, my wife's been telling me something for 20 years and I hear it from a person at the bus stop. It just happens to trigger me to go, oh. And I remember a really specific event years and years ago. It was prior to me even getting married. I was in the UK. I was part of a pharmaceutical company going around rural England, trying to get them to stock up on pharmaceuticals. So I'd be having a conversation with the pharmacist and the people working in the pharmacy. And I remember, because I used to bite my nails. And I've been told for years, you shouldn't bite your nails, Pete, it looks ugly, blah, blah, blah. I went, yeah, I'll stop. And I remember it, and I can probably take you back to the same store. It was one of the ladies behind the pharmacy desk who out of the blue said, oh, look at your nails. Stopped. From that moment onwards, I've never bitten my nails again. Okay, slow your roll. What happened there? What is, how do you make me? But the connection I'm making is that happened to be a random, mysterious, magical 21st whisper. I'd heard all of the logic. I'd heard all of the rationale, and I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. But this random person who made a random comment in a random way at a random place suddenly got me to stop. So hence 21 Whispers is, I believe life is whispering to us all the time, but something has to happen for it to be the 21st to get us to do something. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions about that. Because what I think, because I agree with you 100%, and I think that's both poetic and just incredibly accurate. And it goes to what I'm saying about open up your proverbial ears and your mind, body, and spirit so that you can be receptive more quickly, that it doesn't take 21 or 473 or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Was there something, and you may not, this may be leading in a
direction that's not helpful or really emphasizing what you're emphasizing. But in that moment, were you like, what state were you in? Like, do you remember what you were feeling or how that comment felt coming from her? Was there anything different about your ability to receive it differently?
I wouldn't know. It was such a long time ago. And my guess would be it's somebody I'd never met and I will never meet again. Never. It was a random connection. Inconsequential. Wasn't trying to impress, wasn't trying, obviously I was probably in a client supplier sales scenario, as we all are all of the time. So there was no rationality to why that person at that time. But hence you sometimes never know when the 21st whisper happens, because it might not come from your loved ones, but they've been building all of the way, and you've been ignoring. Suddenly some random thing happened. Oh, I better shift, better do something. And so I've had that experience many times. And so I, see myself as, not literally, but I guess philosophically, a bit of a whisperer, that if I'm working with a group and the irony is I will never know. But if I act, I go into it with a strong intention of being the next whisper for them. And only occasionally do you get the acknowledgement that it's been the 21st. Somebody will say, "Oh, Kristin, you've changed my life," and you go, "Well, thank you. I haven't, because it's been happening all the way up to this point." Right. But often, this was a real big change for me in the work I do. Part of my immaturity and ego needed to be the 21st whisper more often. And obviously, partly it pays the bills. I'm much more comfortable these days, not all the time, but more times, of happening to be the 2nd or the 17th or the 45th. And I'll never know.
You'll never know.
I'll never know. But going into it with a strong intention that I'm speaking to someone and I have no idea who it is. I have no idea who's going to hear this, but someone might.
That's right. God, that's right. I was just saying that to someone. She was going to do something scary. And I said, you have no idea who might hear your words, and it might have a difference. Yeah. It's just this morning.
Yeah. I do a weekly whispers log, which is, a couple of paragraphs about some random stuff I'm thinking about or looking into, and I put a question and a quote in there. On many occasions, I've no idea how this is going to be received, but on many occasions I get the odd email back from a random person saying, "Oh, I needed to hear that today."
Yes.
And I don't know what that's about. I don't even know if they know what that's about. But there's something in that intentionality about putting things out there and being open so others can receive it.
Yes, the intentionality. And the way I think about that is, let me be a voice or a vessel, because I believe sometimes it's not even from me. Like, there's an interconnectedness that I'm tapping into. Allow me to be open to that. Yeah. I had a friend that, I haven't seen him in years. I mean, now it's harder to see people, but he messaged me and said, "I wanted to tell you that 2 years ago today, you said something that changed my life." And I'm like, what did I say? Yeah. And he said it back to me. And I'm like, that sounds like something I would say. And I say things like that all the time. But for whatever reason, that day, that time, that message, he needed to hear the 21st whisper. Yeah. And
I've become more open and relaxed about it being almost as random as that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. It reminds me too, when someone says something, I'm listening to a podcast or a conversation or reading, whatever I'm doing, and someone said something, and it's that 21st whisper for me, like, oh. Yeah. And then I expect when I share that, like, pearl of wisdom, everyone's gonna, they're like, anyway, I'm like, don't you get it? Yeah. Yeah. Not so much. Not always. So much. Yeah.
Can I ask a couple of practical questions? and again, like we all, I'm going to steal this with pride. You said that we can't outthink stress, which even in itself could be a turnaround for someone. What do you mean I can't outthink it? Okay, so what would you advise they do? And I know it depends, but if I came to you and said, look, I'm struggling with, my mental capacity or my mental health, again, we know that physical health contributes to mental health, which sometimes gets forgotten. But could you help me? Is there 2 or 3 things you could suggest if I was trying to not outthink stress? How do I neutralize it?
Yeah. So I think there's about 3 steps to this.
Okay.
I'd like it to be 3 steps. It might be 4.
Make it easy for you.
Want people to have takeaways. Okay,
Yeah.
so the first thing is the pause button. The fact that you, in this hypothetical, are saying I'm stressed, already that is interrupting the habit because you're saying this is what's happening. I am highly sensitive, and sometimes that's a beautiful thing, and often it's a point of very, very much suffering in my life because I can get activated very easily.
Right.
And what I've come to say when I find myself sort of in a spiral or an activation, I have to, or, I will just say, it's happening. Right. And that's pushing the pause button. What I like about that phrase, it's happening, it's not good or bad. There's no judgment. It's just, oh, it's here. It's here. And then give the stress a name. And I don't mean George or Frank, but I mean
that might work.
That might work. But what I'm hoping people do is they increase their emotional vernacular. So there's more nuance. So they can say, I'm feeling anxious or, overwhelmed or trepidatious or whatever word that feels right, just giving it a name. They've done studies, and there's a study out of UCLA, it was called affect labeling, that it goes a long way in emotional regulation.
Right.
Number 1, you recognize it's happening. This is not pleasant. It's happening, and then you give it a name. I'm going to give you 4 steps. Okay.
Great. Like a bonus step.
And then the next thing is to breathe. And when I say breathe, I've had many episodes where I felt very upset and people say, breathe, breathe, breathe. And I'm like, that is the most unhelpful thing. I'm breathing. Yeah, I'm hyperventilating.
I'm breathing
out loud. So often it's actually saying, start with the exhale, because we are hyperventilating. And I'll explain, we've got 2 branches of the nervous system. One is sympathetic, that's upregulating. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. That's really helpful if you're about to give a presentation and you want a little bit more energy. You're about to, run in a race, you want some more energy. But so often when we're stressed, we're in sympathetic. The other side is parasympathetic, and that is rest and digest. That's when we are chilly chill and we feel good. And that's what we seek more often, but it is hard often to achieve when there is stress. And so when we inhale, we're activating sympathetic, we're upregulating. When we exhale, we're activating parasympathetic, we're downregulating. So one of my favorite breathing techniques is what's called ratio breathing. Ratio is that the inhale is shorter and the exhale is longer. So you're using your physiology to regulate your nervous system. You're using your breath to regulate this sensation of whatever the distress is. So in through your nose and there's no magical number, it's tuning into what feels right to give your body the oxygen it needs. For a count of say 4, and then out through pursed lips, like you're blowing through a straw, because it slows it down.
Okay.
8, 10, 12, 16, whatever feels right. And the magic number there is 6. Do it 6 times and you will feel a difference in your physiology. And then you're out of that limbic system, the amygdala, and you can start to ask yourself questions. And this is step number 4. So now your body is like, hey, we're good. But then the brain wants to go. And here's the question everyone asks. And I love the question why, but not in these moments. Why gets us right back into what's broken, what's wrong? Am I going to drown or be overwhelmed in this moment? It's not helpful. The most important question to shift to is to say, what do I need? Instead of why is this happening, it's what do I need? And already that can help people orient differently and care for themselves differently. 4 steps.
Can you just repeat the 4 steps for me, Kristin? I got 1, hit the pause button. Is that
God, I wonder if I gave you 5. 1, hit the pause button.
Yeah.
1, name it.
Okay.
I mean, 2, name it, excuse me. 1, hit the pause button, 2, name it.
Yeah.
3 is breathe, ratio breathing.
Yeah.
And then 4 is, instead of asking, why is this happening? Ask, what do I need?
Okay.
What do I need right now? Maybe you need to get up and walk around. Maybe I need a hug. Maybe I need to splash cold water on my face. Maybe I need to ask a question.
Yeah.
I need reassurance.
Yeah. I'm going to play skeptic for a second. What if I follow the steps and what I need is not available?
Give an example of what you might need that would be unavailable.
So really practical, the classic, I'm walking on stage to do a conference speech and I'm perspiring, I can feel my stomach in knots, and I've got this dialogue going, Pete, you're not ready, this is awful, this is awful. Oh, hang on, remember what Kristin said. So I hit pause, I name it, and again, I totally agree with you, most people's emotional vocabulary goes nowhere near beyond good, bad, happy, sad, but I
that's
can
starting place.
That's a good starting place, right? I can name it, I do ratio breathing, and then I ask myself the question, what do I need right now? And what if the answer, for example, is, I don't know, or the answer is, well, I need this to be over, or I need to have more time prepared. What if the answer to that question makes it even worse?
Yeah. Well, that's why you work with a coach. Right. So that's where it's teaching self-compassion. So when you're learning about self-compassion, that's also that moment-to-moment awareness to say, in this moment, what do I need if I were going to add more nuance to this, to be kind and nurturing to myself? Because what we're seeking is regulation.
Yep.
And so I follow a woman. She is a psychologist and a Buddhist practitioner. Her name is Tara Brach.
Yeah.
And she teaches, but it's an acronym called RAIN. And so it's recognizing, it's allowing. And I want to slow down around allowing. So much of our suffering comes from avoiding feeling. I feel
Let's dive in. I'm going to be self-indulgent here, Kristin. I want to dive into that for a reason. I'll come back to you. So tell me what the I and the N is first.
Okay, and then the I is investigate, and the N, which is bring up RAIN, is nourish or nurture. I like nurture.
Yeah, perfect. Lovely. I'll capture that. So I'm fascinated about this allow. And the reason I'm fascinated is I can't remember, I've forgotten the chap's name. It was a book a while ago, and it doesn't really answer the question, but it got me into this distinction between trying to force something to happen or allowing something to happen. So this toggling between force and allow. Confession here. I've been very good in my life about making things happen. Very good. Hence, I said to you prior, one of the, which I've written about, best and worst things that ever happened to me was my dad passed when I was 10. So, again, it allowed me then to see if I put effort in, if I work hard, if I make it happen, if I do this, if I do that, some pretty good things can happen. Right. So it's very easy to get conditioned. And I don't mean by the, violently force, but it's me, I can make it happen. I'm going to force
sense of
this
agency.
Yeah, I've got absolute 100% agency. To then balance that with allow, and the distinction, the binary distinction I made was, well, that's 0% agency. That's, and I know it's not this. That's me giving up. That's me not controlling. That's me not caring. That's me not, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Intellectually, I know it's elegant and more relaxing and perhaps gives me what I need rather than what I want. I know the the rationality of it all, but how, and I'm asking for a friend, I'm really asking for me, how do you navigate that tricky balance of, because there must be some situations, here's my rationale kicking in, for when making stuff happen by you is okay. There must be, right? And yet, if it's the only approach I've got, then I'm heaping bags of pressure and my shoulders become 5 miles wide, etc. So it's too much. How do you balance that force versus allow?
Well, I think we're talking about different things here.
Okay.
So what I hear you talking about are situations, circumstances. What I'm talking about is emotion. And so in a moment of regulation, let's say you are feeling sad. Most of us, and this is really a Buddhist practice and belief, when emotion comes, most of us, it doesn't feel good. So we push it down or we push it away, right? That's one thing. We avoid it, we repress it, we suppress it. The second thing is it becomes an organizing principle of who we are. Oh, I'm sad, there's something wrong with me. It's an over-identification, right? And so what I'm saying, because then I want to get back to what you're saying, because that's really important. It's just different. Yep. What I'm saying is when we feel something and we go, pick up my phone, distract, call someone, go for a run, those Oreos look good, whatever it is, we're creating what's called amplification. Whatever we persist. So that sadness isn't going anywhere. It's just kind of getting locked in the cells, locked in the body.
Yeah.
To come out sideways in one way or another, whether you end up, snapping at your child, swatting away the dog, flipping someone off in traffic, like it's there. We're just not acknowledging and not letting it move through. And so that is the allow in RAIN. It's saying, okay, sadness, I feel you. I'm going to acknowledge that you are presently here within what is called, and this is why working with a coach, working with a therapist, if this is all really new and you find yourself caught in a lot of hijacks emotionally or spirals emotionally, this is why it's nice to have this process facilitated, because it needs to be within your window of tolerance. If you have for 40 years conditioned, using your term, yourself not to feel anything, and suddenly you're like, I'm going to feel this, it can be like get flooded and talk about getting dysregulated in your nervous system going into activation or shutdown. So it's in doses that feel right. But what I hear you saying with like, okay, so life just threw me a curveball, and I find I get most of my self-worth and I'm getting all of these accolades and reinforcement and financial reward. And there's so much that says, yes, be an agent of change. It's a beautiful thing. But if it's done you can't rest, and the word instead of allow that I would use in that word is sometimes it's surrender. When do you know when to surrender? The self-awareness piece, that's what we're talking about with nervous system regulation. Like, what is in the driver's seat? Is it my nervous system that's in the driver's seat? If I can allow my body to be calm and I can say, what is in my highest good? If I am most connected to my wisdom, what is the right choice? Then in those moments, because your body is calm, you're connected to the, most evolved part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, and then you can have self-inquiry that connects with your values, connects with your desires, not in the moment, but the big part of you. Then you can say, right now, it actually is really important not to come from like this egoic small place of scarcity and fear and competition, but to say, what's in my best interest is to let this one go. And I made it all sound so easy. It's so darn hard.
Well, just pick up on a little point there. Again, we could go many places with that. It's touched me because I've been into all of these things, for example, meditation for a while, but only in the last 3 years really done it consistently. One of the things that one of the people I listen to consistently is a Canadian lady called Sarah Blondin. And the most consistent meditative track that I listen to is Learning to Surrender. Now, what I had to do initially was absolve my attachment to the meaning of the word, which is to give up. As in, that's a bad thing. I've never given up in my life. That's what's made me by not giving up. And so even just this distinction around the word surrender is actually, it's not necessarily giving up, it's letting go.
Yes.
Which, is such an interesting distinction. And I've probably listened, I'm just looking at my app, I think I'm on 367 days consecutively. It would have been at least maybe 100 listens to that same 10-minute podcast. Because I feel I need constant reminding of what I know to be true when I'm present.
Yeah.
But we're so often forced, or we allow ourselves to get forced into past or future, that it's so easy to forget.
That's right. That's right. I love that distinction of surrender is letting go. And there's freedom in that.
There is.
Yeah.
There is.
And although it can feel like if I'm doing something, if I'm achieving something, if I am, manifesting something, that is most meaningful. But that's when you can get caught in the grips of, your own tyranny, your own egoic, fear-based tyranny.
Yeah. The distinction you made about the driver's seat, that you're probably familiar with this. Often in the work I do with clients, I at least introduce them to the concept of whether they are having thoughts or had by their thoughts. And this visual, which I think people get, is, is the thought, is the feeling, is the story, is it in the driver's seat or the passenger seat? Because in the passenger seat, that might be helpful. It might be informative. It might be there for a reason that you need it in 3 weeks' time.
Right.
But right now, if it's in the driver's seat, you're kind of succumbing to it. You're being had by it.
Right, that's I'm stealing that. That's so good. That is so good. It also reminds me, Deepak Chopra said, are you the thinker or are you the thoughts? And that's more of a mindfulness thing. Because people will believe their thoughts.
Yeah.
And they're had by thoughts that are actually not helpful in the moment.
Yeah. And so do you have any, look, I know it depends, and any answer with regard to human beings, the answer is always it depends. A little bit like your kind of 4 steps and the RAIN acronym, any tips on how to help someone from overthinking?
Well, it's all I fear that I will get redundant because it's all the practice of mindfulness. So recognizing what I will often do when working with people is I'd show them a very short video on neuroplasticity. Or we have a habit of thought, the more deeply grooved and strengthened that neural pathway is. And so it can be very hard then to start thinking, doing, believing, practicing, whatever it is, to change, but to recognize that our brains are not fixed, that there is that level of plasticity. And it is a practice, not a perfection, to notice. I was trained as what's called a narrative therapist. And one of the tenets is looking for exceptions to problem-saturated stories. So let's say the identified problem is I overthink everything. To recognize the language, always, everything, never, right? Like, well, I bet there are moments where you have not.
Yeah.
Find those exceptions. And the mindfulness practice is the noticing. Again, are you the thinker or the thoughts? To start to interrupt it and to support people in noticing when they're really caught in their head.
Yeah.
To be able to feel caught in your head right now. How do you know you're caught in your head? I mean, it's really meta. Like this is like
It is,
metacognition.
yeah. I can
Really, really
imagine
weird.
someone in a stress state going, because I am, don't you dare ask.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But again, it's the self-awareness. So, okay, when you're there and because I am, don't ask, like, let's talk about that traffic light. Where are you right now? Are you, I have to? Most likely they're in sympathetic activation and their brain has been a very reliable, thank God. And we don't want to disparage thinking like, thank you, thinking you have served me so well. It's not the
yeah.
bad guy, but you want to be able to back to the like mind, body, spirit, access to a greater perceptual field, recognize there are other parts of you that may have greater wisdom or provide greater relief or insight or whatever it is, that freedom that you want to achieve. Let's wake them up too. Thank you, brain, and let's invite other parts of who you are to the party, which is so easy to say, but that goes back to the embodiment. And particularly people who've had trauma, they may not even be connected to their body. So it's starting really, really small with just what's called interoception, which is the felt experience of living in the body. Like, what does it feel like when you swallow? What does it feel like inside your body when your heart is beating? What does it feel like when you're digesting your lunch? Right? Just this sense of being in your body, if for some reason being in their body has not been safe. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, it is. Yes. And how do you, it's not necessarily a how-to question, but I'm interested in, for someone that lacks, for whatever reason, awareness of their body, and they come to you or I, or anyone that does this work, and you ask them a question like, how does it feel in your body when you swallow? How does it feel in your body when you digest your lunch? If they've never even gone there, been asked any sort of questions like that, do you have to, and I'm not going to choose my words carefully, but do you have to help them preventing from doing it cognitively? Because I could answer that question cognitively. But the irony is, you're not asking me a cognitive question.
Yeah. That may be the inroad. I mean, I feel like it's really baby steps. So there could be practices, right? So it may be, okay, so and this is what I will do with people. I may ask them not even to use words, but I want you to close your eyes and I want you to swallow. And just notice. There's no right or wrong, but just notice sensation. You will not need to report back to me with words, but just swallow. Now I want you to close your mouth and I want you to notice the saliva in your mouth. It seems like I'm paying you to tell me to feel the saliva in my mouth. It's so important.
I know. And I'm just imagining, as we do the hardened, battle-weary corporate executive, when because I've done this before as well, in going through some processes with clients, and here's what you're going to do about it. Nothing. And it freaks them out. It completely freaks them out, because hang on, nothing. I can't not do nothing. I've got to do something. So what do you want me to do, Pete? Well, nothing. I just want you to notice. I can't just notice. That's pathetic. And you get all of this narrative coming out. Hopefully it's expressed and I can help them, but if it's not expressed, they go away going, that's rubbish. You can't not do nothing. That exactly. And that is where this is where, for me as a coach, if I'm working with a client who has that sort of constitution, background, belief system, that's where neuroscience helps me. Right. If I can make it sound fancy and scientific, then there's some legitimacy. Classic.
Yeah.
It's a classic, isn't it? There's letters after my name. I'm wearing a white coat, so you might listen to me a bit more. Exactly.
It exists both ways, but if I can use a big word like amygdala, then...
Well, Kristin must know what she's talking about.
Exactly. I could be full of crap. But it's getting the buy-in. and reaching them where they are. And it's also really normalizing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one, to just normalize that they are not alone.
A little bit of a random thought here, Kristin, and you can choose not to answer if you like, but I'm interested, and I'm going to get personal here. So this is probably more about me. To what extent do you believe or subscribe to the view that we're teaching what we most need to know?
100%. Yeah, that is me.
So it's just you and me that are screwed up.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't, I walk around teaching people everything that I've had to learn for my own healing.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. And when I love being able to connect with people who can be honest enough to say that. I work with anxiety because I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. I worked with imposterism because I've struggled with imposterism. I've worked with dysregulation because having a childhood where there was trauma, and I'm highly sensitive. I've lived too many minutes, hours, weeks, months, years of my life highly dysregulated. So it's what I feel like I'm here to do, what I'm here to learn and to share. And it's hard though, because it feeds the imposterism. Like, I want to be like, I'm always chill. Like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm in the practice. I almost feel like kind of like the wounded, and I don't think I'm a healer, but using that archetype.
Yeah.
Right. And I've struggled with God. I mean, how much do I share with them that I know it because I experience it? And I find the more that I'm really real with, I'm in this practice with you, it's disarming. And people feel seen in a way that if it was just clinical for me and I'd already arrived and right, I'm continually working on this stuff.
Yeah, always.
I'd love to hear you. I want to hear your story around that.
I've forgotten my train of thought there, because what I was about, this might lead into it. And then this might be actually, in fact, in some ways, as I'm pausing to reflect, this probably is a lot of it. I'm observing, this post-COVID shadow to some degree, but many other circumstances where people are, what's the right word? And this might not be the right word, struggling or needing or clamoring for or hungry to be seen, heard, and held. So if I turn that round, in the work I do, I don't think I'm seen. I don't feel heard. And it's not the physical held necessarily, but it's held in a space where it's okay to express and move. And almost every person I come across, so I'm maybe projecting this a bit, there's some sense their life is causing them not to be seen, heard, or held.
Yes, I agree. But that to me, go ahead. I want to hear your question, then I want to tell you.
Is that the human condition?
I believe it's part of the human condition, yeah.
That's our lot. We'll just have to deal with that.
Well, I think, that's our lot. We have to deal with that. I think, number one, there's a sense of purpose and you're giving a gift. I do believe that by virtue of being human, we need and seek connection. We want to be seen, heard, and held. And I think that is just really essential to who we are. We are social creatures.
Yeah.
And the world that we live in certainly doesn't support that. It's about competition. It's about it's about have not. It's about working in our homes in isolation. It's about scarcity. And this yearning, I think, is really quite beautiful because it connects us, in my estimation, to the most beautiful parts of us. It connects us to heart energy. It's the language of love. And you identify that you want more of that and have moments. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine where there's loneliness or isolation and so you're giving that love. And you are someone who is elevating the need for that love. And I imagine it, well, tell me, what does it feed in you to give that to other people?
Um, my thought went to unconditional acceptance. That's where it went. And, you know, for me, and again, here, this is not necessarily about me, but it could be informative. What I've had to, what I'm working on privately, and it's a constant, is being open and, you know, self-compassionate to receive. I think that's one of my biggest challenges. I haven't been built to receive. So whether it's a compliment or love or a hug or compassion, it's almost like I deal with it intellectually as opposed to feel it in my body. And so that's, you know, if we are all on a journey and it's part of the human condition, that's part of my condition. It's working to open up as whatever's necessary for me to receive the different ways in which love or acceptance is expressed towards me.
That resonates more than you know. Yes. It's I'm working with my own coach, and that is something we are working on, that I am working on. Yes. Yes. And so I just think there's something really magical and really essential in that is what you are working on, and you are conscious of that. And yet you are in the line of work where you are giving it so effusively, so purposely.
Yeah.
Right. Same with me.
Yeah.
And to me, it's part of my healing to give it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case for me. I know that as I've moved in, you know, immersed myself in this world, that it is lonely. And it's not necessarily lonely from a physical, conversational, working with physical bodies loneliness necessarily. It's the loneliness in feeling constricted about how you are able to express without being held to account to that expression that you expressed yesterday, which might not be true today because you were just expressing. And, you know, in our field of work, often and professionally, we can't express, and we shouldn't express necessarily because it's inappropriate professionally. It's boundaries, right? I get that. And yet not having an outlet where I can express random stuff, you know, because if I can't express it, I've got to hold it. And it becomes heavy.
Well, yeah, it becomes heavy. So in the last year, I'm now working with 2 coaches because I became sick from the lack of expression.
Wow.
Something called frozen shoulder. Some call 50-year-old woman disease, but it got locked. It got locked and incredibly painful.
Wow.
And being me, yes, there's a physiological reason, but then no one can identify the cause. Why? And I started to really like, well, what does the shoulder represent? Okay, you know, sort of like holding the world on our shoulders.
Yeah.
And so many stories of people both that I work with in my practice, my family. I told you I'm a caregiver for my mother.
Yeah.
There's just so much. And also the relationship with my mother I shared is not always easy. It's almost like holding armor against hurtful words I might get, and my shoulder locked up. And it was only when I started expressing. Like my therapist gave me the homework. There's a place in our town. I haven't yet done it. But there's a place in our town where they have like old TVs and appliances, and you basically put like a hazmat suit on. They give you a baseball bat, and you just go in there, move some of that energy.
Yeah, wow.
I'm holding so much, but not expressing.
Releasing it. Yeah. Kristin, have you heard of a field? I think it's called psychoneuroimmunology.
No, but I feel like I am getting what that must be, because that speaks to what I just said.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And as far as I haven't explored it in depth, but as far as my limited understanding of it, it's this idea that our body holds dis-ease, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, that's exactly what you're saying. That a lot of the diseases, illnesses, it's an unexpressed emotion manifesting in a physical thing, and that's very hard. I've been open to this for years, and that's hard for people to cognitively get their heads around.
Yes. Well, that gets also to the idea, and this is part of the conversation earlier that I was sharing, we were sharing, but my part was it was like, and I don't know if I even said this, but I thought it, we are energy. This brings us a circle, mind, body, and spirit. And so working with this, he's an intuitive healer. He does energy work, like visualizing movement and sending energy for movement. If I'm feeling anger here, it's like, feel the anger here, take the love, move it here, like, and it sounds so esoteric.
It does.
And it is so esoteric because so outside of anything that we've been taught or that feels scientifically valid. But the proof is in the pudding, whether it's placebo, which is super powerful in and of it, or actually working. It was when I started doing these things that suddenly I could move my arm and I didn't have excruciating pain. When I started emoting, when I started crying, when I started being seen, then I felt relief. My body healed.
Yeah. I'm not poo-pooing that at all, but it almost sounds like a miracle.
Right.
And we know that it's not a miracle. It's just, as we started this whole conversation, it's just nervous system dysregulation. And I don't mean by saying it's just to negate and simplify it, because we know it's not
clarify.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Full circle.
Wow. Kristin, that feels like because I'm sensing after we open up any more cans, there's two or three other things that I would like to explore, but I'm just going to be sensitive to time. So what I often do is, well, first of all, thank you for your time. And where can people reach out or read some of the stuff you've done or get in touch with you?
Yes. And so I want to clarify, I have authored 2 books there, however, in higher ed. So it's like a course that helps students with this kind of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
So they're not going to find it that way unless they're in colleges, they use it. They can find me. I have a podcast and it's called How I Made It Through. Talks about challenges that people go through and how they have learned and been transformed, healed, and kind of a survival guide and place of inspiration when people share their stories.
Great.
They can also find me at Kristin Taylor, Kristin, taylorconsulting.com. Also find me on LinkedIn. I'm not great with the social media. That's a work in progress, but the places, or I can be reached at coachkristintaylor@gmail.com.
Great. And we'll put all these things in the show notes for people to connect and dive into, because some of the things that we've talked about, I think people will be interested in, the link for the neuroplasticity video, the RAIN acronym from Tara Brach, things like that. We can help people. I like to finish off in my sense of a little bit light. And so I've got, 4 or 5 quick fire questions, if you'd be happy to answer these, Kristin.
I would love to, yes.
So are you, you live on the West Coast of the US. Are you more beach or mountain?
Mountain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a life maxim you live by?
Yeah, every action in this world has its echo in the heart.
Okay, I like that. When you think of Sydney, Australia, what word comes to mind?
Down under. The 2 words.
Yeah, there you go. Is there a word that you'd use to describe yourself?
That's not a quick fire one.
Yeah, I've just realized that's probably my connection we had previously.
God, whatever I say, I'm going to regret and think I should have said this.
Yeah.
Heartfelt.
Cool. And again, maybe not a quick fire question. Is there a word that other people use when they describe you?
Kind.
What's a book that's changed your life?
Oh, God, there's so many books. I don't know if it's the book that has changed my life. There have been so many books. A book that I've read recently that connects to so much of what I'm sharing today is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Yeah.
What a great place to finish, Kristin, particularly when we talked about nervous system dysregulation and the body keeps the score. Thank you so much, not just for the time, but the connection that we've had, the conversation. It's been really connecting. I've felt seen, heard, and held. So thank you.
That makes my life. I love that. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this so much, and I enjoyed you so much. You have great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again then, Kristin.